Hello, welcome to Brap Life. Thank you guys so much for listening. And again, thank you guys for all the support you've given me the past couple weeks. It's been super cool to hear from so many of you guys and to just touch base with you guys. I love getting messages from everybody. Doesn't matter if you're in Australia and our time zones are like 14 hours apart or if you're in the same state as me. I still love hearing from people. I love hearing how you guys relate to these stories. It's my passion, and I will turn around and share it with the people whose interview you're talking about. I typically don't share who said it, but I do share that because it's really cool for those people to get that feedback. I am super stoked for things that are going to go in the future for this podcast. It's been kind of crazy lately here in my life, but I'm working on improving the podcast. I'm working on getting some more amazing stories for you guys. And then I'm also working on some merch. I've gotten some requests for merch. So that's going to be coming out pretty soon. So keep an eye out for that. This week's episode is really cool. I got to sit down with Tobin Miller, and it's kind of cool that we just interviewed Matt Adams and we're able to turn around and immediately talk to Tobin and kind of just get Tobin's view on everything. Tobin's been pro for a little bit in Hard Enduro, and he has really just been pushing himself this last year, and he's got big plans for 2025. So it's really cool to sit down, kind of hear a little bit about his story and about his passion. So I hope you guys enjoy it, and we'll see you next week. All right. Well, welcome to Brap Life.
Thank you.
So thank you for coming on. This is really cool. I'm super stoked for this.
Yeah, I am as well. It'll be fun to talk.
Wow. Yeah. So let's start at the beginning before we I end up starting to go on a tangent. So how did you get started riding in the first place? Like, how old were you? What kind of bike were you on? Tell us all the details.
So I was about 3 years old, and my dad got me a PW50. So started probably like most other people. And the rule was you had to ride a bicycle with no training wheels without putting your feet down, and then you could get a dirt bike. So I did that, I guess, when I was 3, and then I got a PW50, and I think I rode that for maybe a couple months. I don't know. And then, so my first race would have been the county fair race in like August. And so I probably rode about a year before I did my first race on the PW50. I don't know how it went, but there's pictures somewhere of me riding around and getting lapped by all the 8-year-olds on their Cobra 50s. They were ripping. But started doing that, and then Dad got a TTR 250, and so he was able to ride with me, which was super cool. And he tells me that when I first started learning, we had a cornfield across the road from our house, and I would hop on the bike on one end, ride all the way to the other end, do real great, and try to turn around and fall over. So he would have to run all the way on foot to the other end and pick me back up and bring me back. And then I do the same thing again. And so he decided finally, all right, I got to get a bike so I can chase him around. So he got the 250, and then he rode that for a long time as well. So I started on a Yamaha quite a while. And so I've had a bunch of bikes since then, though. I mean, like all the 50s. We had the KTM Junior 50, KTM Senior 50. I had this weird thing called an Idle Jet for a little bit. I think I got it for Christmas once. Yeah, it was a yellow, not quite a Suzuki, maybe like a Suzuki knockoff. I got it for Christmas, and I really wanted to ride, and so we went out and rode in the snow that day, and it just never ran right. It was just a really weird bike, but other than that, all my mini bikes were a bunch of fun. I had a Kawasaki 65, which is where I learned to use the clutch. That was a lot of fun. And then I had a KTM 85 and a KTM 105. And so I guess I should tell you what kind of racing I was doing, though. So I was doing motocross when I was on 50. And then that was just not quite the scene for us. I mean, everyone there, they're cool for sure. I know a bunch of motocross guys, and they're all pretty nice. But it's just a lot more intense, really. And when you're 5, 6 years old. There's no reason to be screaming at your kid for not getting first place. Like, we just weren't really about that. We just wanted to go out and
Yeah.
have fun and ride our motorcycles together. And
Yeah.
so we raced motocross for a little while, and I was doing pretty well in Iowa. And then
Mhm.
we were at some race, and this other kid tried to run me over, and his dad was getting all mad at me and my dad. And we're just like, it's not really for us. We're just going to kind of take a step back. And so
Yeah.
we stopped doing that. And then I always liked riding in the woods. I mean, we didn't have a moto track, but we had
Mhm.
like some woods trails behind my house and a little bit of the grass track CRP stuff. And
Mhm.
so and one of my dad's buddies had a property that they had a hare scramble at. And so we went over there, and for the 50 course, it was like pretty much just a grass track. And I felt
Mhm.
so good in that because that's all I was riding at home was grass track stuff. And so I got there and I won it, and my sister got third, which is super cool. And so from then on, I was like, hare scrambles are pretty cool, so I'll stick with these. And I
Yeah.
still race hare scrambles. I just raced one yesterday in Illinois. It's a MXC Racing is where I was at. And so
Okay.
hare scrambles were just kind of like a natural segue into hard enduro then.
Mhm.
Just because so I raced hare scrambles for so long. I mean, like 65s is when I started it, and then I went up one class every year, and 85s, and
Mhm.
then C, and then B, and then A, and then double A. And then you get to double A, and it was a lot of fun, and I enjoy going fast and trying to beat those guys. But you just get a little bored sometimes. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of the time we were racing like the same trail every year. They just run it
Yeah.
backwards every other year, and so you get pretty
Yeah.
bored. And then Hard Enduro was just sort of starting out at the time, and I think I went down to Texas for maybe it was Texas Rev Limiter. I don't know if it was called that at the time. It was when Mark Koch was doing those races in Texas. They had like a Red Bull Override, which was a night race.
Mhm.
And my dad and I and my brother and sister, we all went down there and raced that. And that just kind of, I got kind of hooked on hard enduro because it was a ton of fun. Just find your way through the woods in the middle of nowhere. No one out there. I mean, people will help you, but you just feel like you're on your own and you got to fight through it by yourself.
Yeah. That's really cool. I've heard a lot of people kind of say like very similar things to that. I mean, we talked with Riley Bender and he was telling us the same thing that you just did about motocross. It was like almost word for word exactly the
Oh
same.
yeah.
So that was kind of funny. But yeah, the whole like fighting against the terrain essentially, and like
For sure.
I think Radford Chug said it pretty well, like taking your bike over stuff that like your bike shouldn't have to go over ever, but
Yeah,
then you
yeah,
do it and
absolutely.
like
Yep.
that's really cool.
Yep. And that's so much of what I do like during the week is I just go out and I'll find this nasty ravine or some weird culvert that's full of mud and rocks and sticks, and you go down there and then you're stuck and there's
Mhm.
no way to get out. You got to just push your bike and lift it and do all these weird pivot turns and maneuvers, and it's just fun to overcome little challenges like that. And then
Yeah.
you put it all together in a race. It's really fun.
Yeah. So how long have you been at the pro level now? This is your first year, right? Or
No,
is it
actually, no. It's been
okay?
like maybe 3 years, I think.
Oh, okay. All right.
Maybe even four, actually. So,
Okay.
so when I was racing hare scrambles, I would have been 17, and I was in double A class. And then at that point, well, even when I no, so when I was 15, I'm 22 now.
Mhm.
When I was 15, I
Mhm.
that's when I sort of started racing hard enduros, and I went straight to
Mhm.
A class in at the TKO. And at the time, you had to be 16 to race that race, but my birthday was
Okay.
like 7 days after that, so we kind of lied a little bit and said I was 16, and it worked out. And I went there and raced, and that was A class, and so I did A class for 2 years. So
Mhm.
it's like end of 17, going on 18, is
Okay.
I think when I started in pro class. And my first season in pro class, I went to like all the East Coast rounds, but I wasn't really taking it too seriously. I was graduating high school, and
Mm-hmm.
right at the end of the season, or no, right at the end of my right at the end of that season, I was at Rev Limiter again, and I fell on this weird side hill and got my foot stuck in a rock hole, and I not broke my kneecap, but I dislocated my kneecap to the right side,
Mm-hmm.
and so it broke the tendon that holds it in place there. And so that whole season, it was good. So that was my first pro season, and that was good. But I was like 25th everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
maybe top 20 every now and again, but I didn't do all that great. And
Mm-hmm.
so I just was like kind of down about it. And then to break my knee or dislocate my knee at the end of the season kind of sucked.
Mm-hmm.
And then so that winter was my senior year, graduated high school, got out of high school, and raced again in pro class the next year after rehabbing my knee all winter. But just, I didn't do like every race that year. I didn't take it too seriously. Raced a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I was on a beta 250 then. And I actually re injured the kneecap. And throughout that whole season, it was popping out of place again. And so it would dislocate. I think I did only like 5 races that year in pro class, and it would dislocate at every race. So that kind of sucked a lot. And then I got another surgery after that. So 2 surgeries on the left knee. And and that went good the second time. So I got a cadaver tendon in there the second time instead of just stitching it
Mm-hmm.
back together. And so far it's
Yeah.
held now. It's been like 2 years since then, so it's held pretty well.
Good.
But then right after that season, and then right after I graduated high school,
Mm-hmm.
I rode that summer and then had surgery that fall. Recovering from surgery most of the fall, got well enough to go back to work in January, I think it was. And I was just tired of laying on my mom's couch. I was like, I've graduated high school. I got to be able to do more than this. So I got a
Yeah.
job in Wisconsin. I was living in Iowa with my parents, and then
Mm-hmm.
got a job in Wisconsin at a ski resort and moved up here to Wisconsin, which is where I still am.
Yeah.
And at that point, I sold my bike. I didn't have a dirt bike for quite a while. And then in the spring of 22, I got another bike. I had a KTM 200. And I
Mm-hmm.
think I raced like TKO maybe on a beta and one other race or something. But I didn't really race much for hard enduros. I did a few hare scrambles here and there.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 23, I had sold the bike again. I was like super into snowboarding, work at a ski resort. Everybody that I worked with was always snowboarding. So I've got 3 snowboards right there on the wall. I still like snowboarding. But I didn't really ride there for about 3 years. And I mean, I rode a little bit. There's an enduro cross track at the ski hill, which is super cool. But I
Cool.
wasn't really racing, wasn't taking it seriously. And
Mm-hmm.
then last year I bought a CR250, which is right over there still. 2001 CR250, super fun bike, just totally not made for hard enduro, but I made it work and that was fun. And I bought it and went through it all, rebuilt it, made it pretty nice, went down and raced TKO, was feeling really good, and had an issue with my kill switch that put me back a lot of positions, didn't even make it to the second race. And then I was really bummed because the hard enduro season was pretty much over. There was no East Coast races really. And then they added
Yeah.
in the fall series. And so I was super stoked about that. Got my bike back and ready to go, fixed the kill switch, pulled off. So it was like a tether kill switch from a hill climb event that I did. And it was just giving me a bunch of problems. So I pulled that off and then went and did the fall series. And at that point, I was like, all right, well, this is kind of fun. I think I've got a chance to do kind of well in the fall series here in pro class. There's not as many guys. It'll be fun. So I'll actually try it, see what I can do. And I got in the gym and worked out and rode a lot. And it went pretty well, actually. There were no like stellar finishes, but I was just happy to ride again and focus on racing, which was a lot of fun. And then maybe like halfway through those races, there were there were, I think, maybe 6 fall rounds. And so at round
Mhm.
3 or 4, I started talking to Matt Adams, and he hooked me up with some tires for the CR250 and some other parts for the bike. And he was like, dude, what are you doing racing this thing? It's older than you are, and it's not made for this. Ride this bike. And so he let me ride his, he's got a 2020 KTM XCW or XC300.
Mhm.
And so I rode that. I think for the first time I rode it was in Kentucky at the Saddleback Extreme, and it was
Okay.
pretty different from the CR. It was pretty difficult to get used to, but it was such a much better bike, like loads different, and so that went
Yeah.
pretty well. And then I rode his bike for the last 2 rounds of that fall series, and that
Mhm.
went really well. It was so much better than riding the CR. And then I get a call from him. I think it was about March. I got a call from him this year in 24, and he was like, "Hey, have you still been working out and focusing on racing?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, a little bit, and mostly just snowboarding a whole bunch." But yeah, I
Yeah.
have been in the gym, and so he says, "Okay, well that's good news. As long as you've been still thinking about it, I want to see if you are willing to ride my bike this year again, and we can do a champion brick race team." And so
Yeah.
this year, 24, is the first time that I've taken it very seriously and like riding a lot, really trying to get better. And it's been awesome, especially with Matt helping me out. That's been huge with Champion Brick right here. We've
Yeah.
been going to all the East Coast Hard Enduro races and a bunch of like local hare scrambles, just staying sharp there. And it's been so good. I mean, we have such a good bike. We have such a good setup. We've got all the tools,
Yeah.
all the parts. Everything's just dialed this year. So this is
Yeah.
year, I guess, then of pro class, but this would be what I consider really my first year of actually seeing what I can do.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like having that kind of sponsorship really kind of inspires you to push harder.
For
It's
sure.
like that somebody really believes in you and they're giving you this chance, and so you're trying to like live up to that expectation.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'll be
Yeah.
laying in bed in the morning. I'm like, oh man, I don't want to get up. I don't want to go ride. I don't want to go to the gym or whatever. And then you just think, oh, but there's that bike sitting out in the garage, and I know what Matt puts in. I've got to match that at the
Mhm.
very least. So I get
Yeah.
up and I do it, and you got to match it.
Yeah.
It's a good
Yeah, no,
motivator.
he's got a lot of passion for the sport, and I think that's really cool to
Oh,
have somebody who
absolutely.
has so much passion to be behind you and to really believe in you. He's a guy who's got a lot of experience in the sport, and I think that's awesome. Like, have
Yeah,
him be on your team.
he knows how to build a very capable bike for sure. Because I'm
Yeah.
sort of known for being pretty hard on bikes. I break a lot of stuff. I crash in weird ways that you should not crash in pretty frequently. I've gotten a lot better this year though, so that's pretty good. But I've not DNF'd any of his bikes, knock on wood, and they hold up so good. I mean, I've had some really weird crashes or nasty ghost rides in rock gardens, and pick the bike up, hit the button, and it goes right away, and you're just ready to go.
Yeah, that's really cool. I completely understand having weird crashes. Like, I'm the person who does that all the time. I'm like, I don't even understand what just happened right now. So it's it's crazy what your bike can do, like when you crash and you're like, I don't even understand. I don't get how that
Mhm.
just happened. Like,
Yeah. Yep.
what did I even do? um but yeah, anyway, so kind of from what I was just saying, so I've been really focusing on fundamentals. I've taken a lot of clinics and stuff like that. Have you had any kind of formal training since you started, or has it kind of all been just you figuring out on the bike, or how have you really like learned how to ride?
Um, I've never had like any formal training. When I first started getting into hard enduro, Graham Jarvis did a training class in Texas, and so we went down
Mhm.
there. And then like 2 weeks later that's how we figured out about the rev limiter. And so 2 weeks later, we went down to the rev limiter. I think it was, or it was shortly after. but that's like the only training class I've ever done. And I was pretty young, and I just remembered being like starstruck and riding with Graham Jarvis. So I don't remember too much of what he taught us. I just remember he did a lot of figuring for the warm up, so I do that sometimes. Mostly, I just kind of taught myself, and my little brother's really fast too. So growing up, he was always pushing me, just trying to stay ahead of him. He's still never beaten me, so I'm pretty happy about that.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
he's pushed me, and then there's some other pretty fast guys from Iowa that have pushed me in hare scrambles. But as far as riding by myself during the week, I've never really had anyone who has come over and been like, "This is how you should be positioning your body," or "This is what you should do."
Yeah.
I watched a lot of YouTube though. I mean, I still do, but growing up, I watched a ton of YouTube, just everything from motocross to Erzberg, like Erzberg in the 80s when they were on adventure bikes, or maybe it was the 90s, but just all these videos of guys riding. And after you watch so much, if you're paying attention to how they do it, you notice a lot of similarities. And so I think that has helped me a little bit as far as body position goes. But at the end of the day, if you just like try to practice one skill or have one skill in mind and just try it over and over and over again for weeks on end, and eventually I think you'll figure it out. But it kind of takes a while doing it that way. But it's what works for me. Just put my head down and try the same thing. Right now I'm trying to do rear wheel hops on the bike, which is really difficult. I can kind of do them on the trials bike, but just do it over and over and over again, and it gets super boring. And so I'll go off and I'll do some weird little jumpy stuff on the enduro cross track and get myself feeling good again and my arms feeling fresh, and then go back and just over and over again go up the same section of hill and try to time the suspension right. And it's just a lot of being like conscious about how your body is moving, and it's pretty difficult. I was just talking to Matt about this the other day, actually, or yesterday. We were on our way back from the hare scramble, and we were talking about things like using your front brake and back brake. And I remember when I was on an 85, one of the biggest things that helped me get quicker was realizing that just hold that finger on your front brake and use your front brake coming into every corner. And I remember being out behind the house, like thinking about that in my head and going over it. And I heard it, someone said it at a race somewhere. I don't even know who, but they said just use the front brake in the corners, it'll make you faster. And I remember just practicing that over and over again. And I think it makes a huge difference. Although now I think I use it a little too much. I'm pretty heavy on it, like 3-to-1 on front brake pads to rear brake pads. It's quite a bit. But it's just a lot of repetition, I think, is the key.
Yeah, definitely. And that's definitely something that like I said, since April, pretty much I've been on this bike. I had a TTR 125 before that. And for me, I have the knowledge like on what I need to do. It's just figuring out how to do it with my body. And
Exactly.
my worst thing is like for logs, my timing is terrible on getting my front tire up in time.
Yep.
Like, and then my balance I'm still working on. But part of that is too the confidence of whether or not I can put my foot down to save myself.
Yeah.
If things go sideways, I know I'm going to end up on the ground. But I do try and like session things like that. Like I try and pick something that I'm not good at. And I try and be on the bike at least 3 times a week during the week. And then on the weekends, I go trail ride with friends. That's like the fun time. But during the week, I try and like really session it and like do my drills and things like that during the week, because it does make a huge difference. Like I said, I've come such a long way since March. I was so deadly afraid of like going on any little downhill. If there was rocks, I would just lock up so bad and I would just get so scared. And now I'm going down stuff at Brushy Mountain that like it's pretty ridiculous, but it's so much fun. And I wouldn't have it any other way. I'm really hoping to get into Hard Enduro next year. So we'll see if that happens, but that's my goal. So
Yeah, that's a good goal. for sure.
I've been watching it since like probably 10 years ago. I used to, like you said,
Oh
on
wow,
YouTube
yeah,
watch Erzberg and stuff like that. I actually
Mm,
didn't know that there was a US series until this
yeah.
year. And I was
Oh yeah,
like, oh, cool. I
it
could
is
have been
fairly
going to
new.
Hard Enduro this whole time.
Hmm. Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and the series has just started to really pick up in the last 2 or 3 years,
Mhm.
when, especially when Matt Musgrove took it over. It's been awesome the last couple of years, and just
Yeah.
seeing it's so much more professional now. And you've
Yeah.
got all the rounds and more or less the same schedule every year, so it keeps it consistent, and all the locations are super great.
That's good. So out of
Mhm.
all of those, out of all of the ones that you've been to, so even outside of Hard Enduro, what is your favorite place to race at?
Um, that's a tricky one. There's a lot of different places I like for different portions of the track, but I might have to say the one we did a couple weekends ago in Marquette. It was called the
Oh
Mad
yeah.
Moose in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, so like 6 hours
Yeah.
north of my house. It's pretty close. But that was just super cool trail. It was a little more toned down from some of the things like Tough Like Roar. That one's really gnarly, especially this past year. But that was just
Mhm.
really cool fall colors and really cool lake views, some good downhills, a couple of nice uphills, and some rocky stuff here and there. It was pretty good. Um, but then also TKO is awesome just for the scene of going there, and there's like 400 people that are just stoked about hard enduro. It's so cool to be a part of that and to see, especially when it's on the World FIM series. It's so cool to see all those riders and the way that they ride and how they attack obstacles is super fun. Um,
Yeah.
but I don't know. Yeah, I like them all. I don't like the Ohio rounds so much. They're all real slick and a ton of rocks, and I don't do as well in slick rocks as I do other places. So probably
Yeah.
not those two. But Pennsylvania is always super cool. I really like Tough Like Roar. The that sort of like coal mine black dirt stuff is very similar to a
Mhm.
place that I grew up riding at, and so I feel kind of at home there. Although there's no rocks like that in Iowa, that's for sure. But the dirt those are sort of similar. Um,
What area of Iowa are you from? Like northeast, south?
sort of like southeast. We're
Okay.
kind of close to the Mississippi, maybe an hour west of the Mississippi, and
Okay.
an hour and a half to 2 hours north of Missouri. So
So
sort
what's
of the
the terrain like there? Because my experience with what Iowa riding is like is flat. Like
yeah,
very flat and like not a
yeah,
whole lot of anything. So I
yeah.
actually learned how to ride in Waterloo. So
Oh, right on. Okay, that's not far
Mhm.
from where I grew up. Maybe an hour 45.
Okay.
Yeah, you're pretty much spot on. There's a lot of cornfields. Uh, there's not many rocks, but there are some hills here and there. Uh, Nothing like Brushy Mountain for sure. But
Mhm.
if you it's hard to compare. Well, there is actually a hard enduro in Iowa, but it's hard to compare it to any
Yeah.
other hard enduro races. There's
Yeah.
nothing as far as hills like that, but there are some shorter, steeper hills that you definitely have to work for. Um, and there's some rocks here and there, some rock gardens, some rock creeks, but
Mhm.
mostly it's just a little flatter. There's a lot of good, tight, twisty single track, a lot of roots and logs, so I've gotten pretty good at those. And the
Yeah.
dirt is always really great, especially when it's a little moist. It's just perfect
Mhm.
dirt there. There's no like nasty mud clay how you get at Brushy Mountain. If it rains out there, it's just like hard packed clay. None of that in Iowa really. It's all perfect topsoil, so that keeps it nice. And I didn't realize until I moved to Wisconsin, but I was actually kind of spoiled growing up in Iowa. I mean, there were 3 or 4 OHV parks within an hour of our house, so there's plenty
Mhm.
of places to ride if you're in Iowa. Not all of them are
Yeah.
super gnarly, but growing up, I like made a bunch of lines out there that are still standing today. So there's some gnarly stuff out there if you know where to look for it. And there's some guys that are into trials there too. So there's some good trials sections, and rocks and tires that
Cool.
they've built up. Um, but if you want rocks in Iowa, you pretty much got to go down to Chadwick or Missouri or St. Joe in
Hmm.
Missouri. There's some good
Hmm.
stuff down there. And then
Yeah.
the racing scene in Iowa is pretty cool too. There's a really strong hare scramble racing scene, and we're so close to Illinois that we went over there always and raced those guys. And those guys are super fast. I mean, Tanner Whipple's in ISD, Cody Barnes, both those guys are in. Cody was on the trophy team, and Tanner was on a club team, and then Jack Walker was also on a club team. They all did very well in ISD recently. And they're all from Illinois, so
Nice.
there's a bunch of fast dudes to push you to go faster there. But the
Yeah.
terrain is not quite as gnarly as anywhere else.
Yeah. Yeah, it was definitely very different I went from Minnesota, so that's where I was
Mm-hmm.
living when I learned how to ride, but I actually learned in Iowa. Then I rode a little bit in Minnesota, and then I moved to North Dakota, and there was like almost
Yeah,
nothing to ride out there. And
really, I
then
thought
I went
it would
to,
be awesome.
so I never found a whole lot to ride in North Dakota. There's apparently a place in the Bismarck area that's really cool. And then out in the Badlands, there's some
Yeah,
areas that you can
yeah.
ride, but I
We went
never found where to go for that. So the only places I
oh,
could ever find were like for bicycles, like for mountain
yeah,
biking.
okay.
And I was by myself, so I didn't want to try and go out there and just get like lost in the Badlands on my bike.
Yeah,
So
yo,
so I didn't really explore it that much. But I know that there's some pretty cool races in North Dakota. They only have a few hare scrambles a year, but they do have a schmedium enduro, which I just did a few weeks
oh,
ago, and
really?
that was pretty cool.
Yeah,
They work really hard because they don't have the terrain for like true hard enduro. But Dylan and his family really work hard. There's a lot of logs, a couple
nice.
rocks, and they have a pretty gnarly enduro cross section that they built
Okay,
up, and
yeah.
it was a
I'm a big
lot.
fan of those races. I like the medium enduro or like a hard scramble is what I've heard them called as well. I like those
Yeah,
quite a bit because I really enjoy hare scrambles and going
yeah,
fast, especially off the start line with like 20 people all around you, just trying to work your way. And the first lap is always so hectic. But I
yeah,
really like those. And then you throw in a little bit more difficulty and it just makes it even more fun. While at the same time, you're not pushing your bike for 3 hours out of the 6 hour race and just struggling
yeah, yeah.
immensely. So it keeps
Yeah,
it
you should
a
hit
little
up the
faster.
Schmedium Enduro next year.
Yeah, yeah, I
That would
might. I didn't
be
know that was the
totally your
thing
style.
for
It's
sure.
so this year was its second year.
Okay.
So
Hmm.
it was only the second year this year. And so next year, hopefully it'll be even bigger. So
Yeah, yeah. One person bigger, I'll be there.
yeah. Great. Maybe I won't go next year. No, I'm just kidding. No, it'll be really cool. Yeah, if you went, that'd be awesome. They would be super stoked for you to be there because it's Dylan's family's private land, and they just
Oh,
open it
okay.
up to everybody in the series.
Nice.
So they're just like, "Hey, come and camp on our land,"
Yeah,
and yeah,
yeah,
it's really cool. And North Dakota's got just some absolutely amazing people. Super welcoming, super great, super helpful. So it was a really good experience because I lived in North Dakota for like a year and a half, but I didn't really meet people oddly until after I was like right before I left. And then after I left, I've met a lot more North Dakota people oddly. Um, so when I went back, like I knew two or three people there that I had actually met previously, and that was it. And so I felt super awkward because I drove all the way from Tennessee to go to that race because I was like helping promote it and stuff. And so I
yeah,
was just like, trying to be supportive. And yeah, it was really cool. Everybody was just like, I was struggling a lot and people were just like cheering me on and they were just like super great. And they're like, yeah, you could just try doing this and try doing that. And people were telling me what I did good. And it was just a really, really great atmosphere. So highly recommend it.
yeah, yeah. I ought to check it out.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not too far from you. If you're used to going to
No,
Texas
maybe
for
not. Yeah,
races, that's
yeah.
not far at all.
Yeah.
So what's the difference in terrain like between Iowa and Wisconsin then?
It's really not too much. Wisconsin is just a little. At least I'm in southeast Wisconsin, so I'm kind of
Okay.
by Milwaukee, down at the bottom of it.
Mm-hmm.
Where I am, it's pretty gravelly and sandy for the most part. But if you go about 2 hours north, you can get to a place called Tigerton, which has some really good boulders and some nice dirt, and that's not very sandy at all, really. And then if you just keep going north, it gets rockier and rockier the further you go. Um, yeah, but where I am, it's just real like deep gravelly sand for the most part. You get a little bit of good dirt here and there, but not very common. Which
Okay.
is it's
Interesting.
kind of a struggle because all my hill climbs that I make just erode within a couple months, and then you got to move on to the next one because they get pretty washed
Yeah.
out. Uh,
Well, just
but,
makes you
but
that much better at hill climbs.
yeah, I guess so. Yeah, on loose gravel and stuff. Yep.
Yeah.
And there's a couple more hills actually. Oh, there's a fly. But since I work at a ski resort, I got a little bit of a hill there, so I'll ride along the side of
Oh, yeah.
the resort and some other stuff
Mhm.
in the valley area that I work at. But other than that, not too much in the area for hills. You just got to go north if you want the good riding.
Yeah.
You gotta go about. What I found is 2 hours seems to be the sweet spot. There's a bunch of places north. There's a couple places in Iowa that are about 2.5 away from me, and then
Mhm.
some places in northern Illinois that are right at 2 hours. So that's usually what I'm driving every weekend to go find hills and rocks.
That's not too bad though. So
No, no, I suppose not. I could live in Kansas. That would be rough.
yeah, well, like I said, when I was in North Dakota, there wasn't a whole lot out there, so I was having
Mhm.
to drive back to Minnesota. So it was at least a
Yeah.
6-hour
Yep.
drive to get to
Holy
anything.
cow!
So
Yeah, yeah, that's a
yeah.
lot. And I'm
Hmm.
very fortunate as well that I am able to ride where I work. So my boss is super
Yeah.
cool there. He races hard enduro as well, and he's built up an enduro
Nice.
cross track in a trials area right off the side of the ski hill. And there's even some single track up there. So I've got all that stuff. It'll entertain me for quite a while every day. But you just get bored riding the same stuff every single day. So it's hard
Yeah.
to find other places. There's a couple of private places nearby for some good hare scramble stuff, but it's
Mhm.
also really tricky to find people who are willing to just destroy their bikes and their bodies for 4 hours and go out and ride like all this super nasty stuff. And
Yeah.
there's a few here and there, but I end up riding alone on the same stuff most of the time.
Hmm.
Still fun though, and I just enjoy riding my dirt bike. I go out there and don't really think about much and just kind of do the same stuff over and over and over again.
That was actually going to be one of my questions was how do you keep the passion?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, like right after I graduated high school, I was still into dirt bikes and I still enjoyed riding motorcycles, but I was just not passionate about it. I got really into
Mhm.
dirt jumping bicycles and started doing that a whole bunch, especially when I moved
Mhm.
here to Wisconsin. There's a bunch of good local dirt jumps. Um, but then I've just been doing it for so long. Like, I don't know what else I would do after work. I don't know what else I would do on a weekend. So just go to the garage and get the bike and ride the bike because
Yeah.
it's what you do. I don't know. It's not like I don't like wake up and I'm just super passionate. Like, oh man, if I know I'm gonna go somewhere sick to ride, I'm super stoked about it. But just like
Yeah.
what you do, just go ride every day after work. So it's sort of like a medium passion every day that
Yeah.
just keeps you going. If you burn too hot, you'll burn out quick. So
Yeah.
you
That's
just
true. So it sounds like you have like a pretty strong mindset. Like you kind of, like you just said, if you go too hard, you're going to burn out,
Mhm.
which you definitely don't want to do, but you still get excited about going and riding and racing, it sounds like.
Oh,
So,
absolutely,
like,
yeah. Fridays are
that's
always
cool.
awesome because you're looking forward to the weekend.
Yeah, for sure. So, what about like when you're in a race? So what is your mindset like when you're in a race, when you're in like a really difficult section? What is kind of like your thought process look like? Do you stay really positive? Do you get really frustrated? And how do you move through that?
Um, it kind of depends what position I think I'm in. If I think I'm like doing fairly well relative to my skill, then I'm if I'm in a really nasty section and I'm stuck, I'm definitely a lot more positive about it because I know that
Yeah.
I'm still feeling pretty well about the race overall. But if I've had like a
Mhm.
bad first lap, or if I didn't get the whole shot, or something weird happened on the start and I feel like I'm way behind everyone, then I do
Mhm.
get a little frustrated. But overall, during it's just kind of in general, I'm pretty even keeled. So I'm not gonna like scream at my bike or kick stuff or like get real mad. I mean, you see some people do that and just start revving their bike and spinning on everything, and you just think that's a
Yeah.
little unnecessary. So overall,
Mhm.
if I'm in something really nasty and I'm stuck, what I really like to do is just step off the bike, step back, look at it, think about it. I'm like, all right, okay.
Mhm.
All I got to do is pick up the rear tire, move it over 6 inches, pick up the front, move it over a little bit. We'll try this different line. Okay, that didn't work. The tire slipped off, or so move it the other way. Try that again. Just
Mhm.
like step back and look at it. And what helps a lot as well is just step back, let go. And I get a lot of arm pumps sometimes. So I just open and close my hands for a while and breathe. And it's like, who
Mhm.
cares if you lose 20 seconds? It's a hard enduro. The race is 6 hours. And it's so much more
Yeah.
important to keep a good mindset and not start this terrible snowball effect of mistake after mistake. So if you just
Mhm.
step back and think a little bit, I've been in all of these situations before. I know how to move my bike up the hill or through the rocks or wherever. It's often I
Mhm.
just get so stuck and focused on trying to go forward fast that I just need to step back and think about it and try it a little bit different, or just move the bike a little bit to the side and you'll be able to make it up a lot of the time.
Yeah, I like that. A really like logical approach to it as opposed to like an emotional approach. That's
Hmm.
good.
Yeah, yeah, it helps not have that get in the way. But for sure,
That's
sometimes
really
I'll just get caught up in it and go for
yeah.
it, and that always sucks because then you're still stuck after it. You're still stuck in a
Yeah.
hole, even though you've been revving your bike and like spinning your tire. Now your knobbies are all roached, and you're trying to get up and out. And you used all this energy, and then at the end of the day, you
Yeah.
still just you look at it and you're like, oh, my tire's stuck here. I should have just looked at that at the beginning, and I would have known that all I
Yeah.
needed to do was move it a little bit to the side. I could get up it.
Yeah. Yeah, you get really tunnel vision on going forward that you don't
For
look at like
sure.
what's
For
happening
sure.
right in front of you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay. That's good. Good to really focus on um I had a like an incident, I guess, when I first
Yeah.
got here to Tennessee and I ended up down a mountain essentially. I didn't
Yeah.
realize I was going down a mountain. But I turned around and I had to go back up.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have the balance for that on super slippery, no traction with like it was literally like this going uphill.
Yeah.
And I knew I could have called for help once I got to a certain point and got service, but
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I'm really stubborn. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, what am I going to feel like if I give up right now? Like, if I
Yeah.
call somebody for help, that's giving up. And I'm like halfway up this mountain already. Like, so I was pushing my bike in first gear. I had it and I was like walking it up and having to like zap it over all these roots and rocks and stuff. And again, that's a big bike. So
Yeah.
it was taking a lot out of me, but it was like a mile and a half of up just doing that consistently. And I was just kept telling myself the whole time, and this is like my new thing is I do hard things for fun. And I just kept
Yeah.
saying that. And that's what got me through because I feel like you have to find something to like really focus your energy on that's like outside of what that little thing is that could be really frustrating. But like I really like your approach to it, just being able to like step back. You have the expertise to be able to like know what you're doing.
Hmm.
But I like that stepping back approach. That's really cool to just kind of like almost like recentering yourself
Yeah,
to
yeah, for
to
sure.
and then coming back into it.
Yep.
So
And I,
that's
I
really cool.
I do a very similar sort of thing in hare scrambles. A
Mhm.
lot of the time at the end of the first lap, it's always so hectic. There's just so many guys that are close to the same speed in double A. And so
Mhm.
usually at the end of the first lap, I'm all pumped up and my brain's just going all over the place. I'm not focusing very well. And so I'll
Yeah.
still be riding, but I'll let go of the bars with my fingers and just sit there and rest and like cruise down an open section or something and just make sure I breathe for a little bit and think. And I tell myself, all right, I'm here. I'm racing this race. This is where I'm at. This is my goal for this next lap. Here's some hotlines I want to make sure I hit, and just like try to just think about it a little more, not just go
Yeah.
all out helter skelter. Because then I get snowball real bad. I start crashing a lot, and it just goes downhill. So if I can keep it smooth, then
Yeah.
it's pretty good.
Good. Good.
Mm.
So when you're getting ready for a race, um, kind of like, well, let's talk about right now, right? So the series is about to be over for Hard Enduro.
Yeah,
So
just one
going
more.
into like kind of the off season, what is your fitness routine and everything look like? Do you keep up with it? Do you give yourself a break? What does that look like for you?
Um, this is kind of in my eyes like my first time going into the off season, knowing that I'm going to go into next year even harder than this year. Like, so this is
Mhm.
sort of what I'd call it like the first off season that I'm going to have. I don't my kind of but my plan is just ride a bunch of trials and stay active for
Mhm.
sure. Like I'll still stay with the same gym program. I use a guy called Joel Youngkin's training. He's really
Oh,
good.
me too.
Oh yeah, right on. I like his stuff a lot. It's just like 3 days a week.
Yeah.
It's pretty mellow. I'm able to get
Mhm.
it done in an hour before I go to work, and so it's not too bad.
Mhm.
Um, but just do that, and then a lot of trials. The difficult part is that working at a ski resort, the winter is super busy for me. I make
Mhm.
snow and I work as a chairlift maintenance man. So during the first 2 weeks of the season, I work every night and then sleep during the day, and we make snow and get that up and running. And then after
Mhm.
that, it's like super, super busy until the holiday season. And then after
Mhm.
the holiday season, you get 1 day a week off. So then I get to have a little more time to ride or do whatever I want. But for the first half, it's really not as much riding. Um, just
Mhm.
I am able to get to the gym consistently, but
Yeah.
I'll try to definitely ride a bunch of trials this winter is my plan. I think that those skills transfer over super well. But
Yeah.
fitness wise, I feel pretty good about where I'm at. So just keep that the same, keep the same
Mhm.
consistency and just slow improvements for there.
Good. Cool.
Mm.
So, then kind of along with that, what does your nutrition look like? Are you really strict with it or are you pretty lax with it?
I'm not really strict. No, I'm probably too lax actually. I've definitely gotten a lot better this past summer. Um,
Mhm.
but and it's never like I don't eat McDonald's every day. All the other guys at work go to
Mhm.
Culver's almost every day, and my girlfriend makes really good food, so I'm eating chicken and rice every day and a bunch of other good stuff. So I'm
Nice.
pretty good with it, but I'm not on. I mean, so Joel did send out a fitness plan or something along the lines of that, and it just has like a
Mhm.
general idea of what you should be eating. But I don't track calories. I don't do any of that stuff, and it seems
Mhm.
like no matter what I do, I'm pretty much the exact same weight all the time. I've not really grown or not really changed in the last 3 years, so it's pretty consistent.
Yeah.
Keep it the same, and just eat a lot of meat, eat a lot of not a lot of
Mhm.
vegetables. Never really liked that, but try to stay pretty healthy.
Yeah. I found that when I changed my eating habits kind of at the beginning of the year, and when I started adding more protein in, I felt like my endurance got a lot better because I also run a lot. I was training for
Oh,
an ultra marathon.
nice.
So yeah, like I said, I do hard things for fun.
Hmm.
Um So I really increased my protein intake, and I noticed that it made a huge difference with my endurance, both on and off the bike. So with my running and my riding. And it was just like a total change for me.
Hmm,
Instead
nice.
of going just a couple hours and getting tired, I could literally ride for like 5 or 6 hours and at the same intensity and not get tired like I used to. So
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was it was really cool to kind of see that. So I'm always just interested in like what other people's nutrition looks like. And I know a lot of people that listen are really interested in that too. They like to know like, so that then the next question is, what does a race day look like as far as like what you're eating for the day?
Um, Not really anything crazy. I don't eat too much on race day. I do think it's important
Mhm.
to eat the day before, and I also
Mhm.
think it's important to eat pretty much the same stuff you eat all the time. Like, I'm not going to really go out and eat some really fancy steak or something right before, because although I do eat a
Yeah.
lot of meat, I don't want to switch it up too much from what I normally eat. So,
Mhm.
one big thing I like to do, sort of superstition, but I really like bagels, and so I really like to have a bagel with an egg on it every morning and some cream cheese. And so I always make sure to bring a toaster and some eggs and bagels and eat that in the morning. But other than that, usually just eat some ham and cheese sandwiches or something, like nothing too
Okay.
crazy. Uh, I like pretzels, eat a lot of pretzels on race day, and make sure to drink a lot of water, obviously, but I don't really use any supplements or anything. Don't I drink Gatorade sometimes, but nothing. I'm not like chugging Gatorades or Gatorlight right before the race. Right after the race, though, I just like to have a massive cooler and I'll just eat everything in the cooler. Just I'm always so hungry afterwards, so I eat a whole bunch, but that doesn't really matter as much. Um, but yeah, race days most important for me is the bagel egg sandwich, just because I like to start my day off that way. That and a cup of
Okay.
coffee for sure. But that can be kind of weird. I feel like often if the race is at maybe 9 a.m., I'm probably not going to drink coffee because I'll usually drink coffee at like 6 or 7. And then
Mhm.
I sort of feel really jittery and weird about 10, which isn't so bad on a
Mhm.
normal work day. I don't really care. But if I'm going to race, I don't want to feel jittery like that. So I kind of shy away from it. Um,
Yeah. Yeah,
but
definitely.
yeah, mostly just lots of water. Definitely lots of water the week leading up to it as well. And just like if
Mhm.
you're gonna go and eat a whole bunch of McDonald's and Culver's or something on Friday and Saturday on the way to the race, you're just gonna feel like junk on the day of the race. So you also got to
Mhm.
be very conscious of packing snacks for the drive because otherwise
Mhm.
you end up eating those gas station hot dogs. That's not so good.
No,
You'll
that's how you end up with food poisoning.
yeah, I imagine so. Yep.
Um, okay. So I think that pretty much covers the big questions on like racecraft and things like that.
Okay.
Um, but I do have one more question, and this one always throws people off, so I always kind of save this one.
Oh
So
yeah.
if I told you that you get to leave in the next hour, you have to, or you get to go anywhere in the world, all expenses paid, where are you going to pick to go? It could be anywhere to ride. And it could be a race or it could
Mhm.
just be just to go ride.
I don't know. There's so many cool places in the world that you can ride at.
Hmm.
There's so many cool races. I would have to
Okay,
say
let's pick one of each. Pick one race and then one other place.
okay. Well, that makes it a little easier then. I'd probably say race wise Romaniacs just because you get to ride for
Okay.
5 days straight and it's so brutal and it's just known as being this super gnarly race.
Hmm.
And everyone says the race scene there is super epic. Everyone's just all stoked about racing and hard enduro. I think that would
Yeah.
be pretty cool, and it would be way different than anything I've ever done. I've done like a couple 2 day enduros, but nothing that long. That would be so cool. Um,
Yeah.
and I think if I could ride anywhere in the world, like tomorrow, tomorrow's Tuesday. If I could go anywhere on a Tuesday tomorrow and just ride, I'd probably go back to Iowa and go to Bluff Creek. I haven't been there
Oh,
in
okay.
3 or 4 years, and I just really like riding there. They've got this weird video gamey style black dirt hills. You can do a bunch of super cool natural doubles and step ups, and just a bunch. It brings back a lot of good memories of riding with my dad and my brother and sister when we were younger. I'd go ride there with them because that's always a ton of fun.
That's awesome. So
Hmm.
does your sister still ride?
No, not as much. She's in New Zealand right now for a exchange student trip. So
Okay.
so I don't think she's ridden over there yet, but she does know a couple of girls from when she was racing NEPGs that live in Australia.
Yeah.
I think they live in Australia, New Zealand area, somewhere over there.
Yeah.
She was going to talk to them about maybe borrowing a bike and riding for a little bit, but
I
she
was
she
gonna
hasn't
say,
ridden.
let me know because I know some people in New Zealand now. So
Okay, yeah, right
yeah.
on. But no, she's got a Beta 200, so that's sitting at mom's shop right now, and she's coming back in 3 or 4 weeks, I think. So she'll probably be
Oh,
riding it a little bit in the fall here when she gets back. My brother still rides all the time. Dad rides all the time, so we ride a
that's
lot.
awesome.
Hmm.
It's cool that you have like a family dynamic like that. Like I thought it was really awesome when you were talking earlier
Hmm.
about, your brother and your sister also raced with you. Usually it's just like your brother, but it's cool that your sister was part
Yeah,
of that
yeah,
too.
exactly. And it was right off the bat. Like I'm the oldest, my sister's the middle, and Tucker, my brother, is the youngest. Kina's my sister's name in the middle.
Hmm.
So I got a bike when I was 3, and then passed it down to her, and she passed it down to Tucker. So we all started when we were real young, and we're all within 3 years, 3 or 4 years of each other. So we're
Yeah.
all close enough that we could ride together all the time and have a ton of fun. And then um, Kina, my sister, raced until she was, I don't know how old she was. She was on a 50 senior though, and she wadded it
Mhm.
into a tree like super hard, just full throttle straight into a tree at a hare scramble, and it scared her pretty good. And then she didn't want to
Yeah.
ride for a little while, so Tucker and I kept riding. And then I think I was on like an 85, and my brother was on a 65. We were racing hare scrambles every weekend, and my sister and mom were always coming with us.
Yeah.
And Kina was just like, well, I kind of want to do this too. So she got a CRF 110, or like a
Mhm.
CRF 150, one of the big wheel ones, not the pit bike.
Mhm.
And then she started racing too, and she did really well in women's class. And then she got a KTM 85 and did well there too. And then moved up to she had a Beta. I think she went straight to the Beta 200 after her big wheel 105. And at that point, she started racing NEPGs, and she did really well there in the amateur women's class. And then
Yeah.
we were for like 5 or 6 years there. We were all every weekend, just all three of us and dad going racing all over the place, which was super fun.
That's really, really cool.
Hmm.
That's an awesome dynamic that not everybody gets to have. Is just having
Yeah,
your
oh
family
yeah,
be part of
super
that.
lucky for that. Oh, for sure. And that's what I like so much about dirt bikes is it brings everyone together, and it's not like every
Mhm.
other sport where after high school you either got to go super pro or quit. Like after
Yeah.
high school, you can just keep riding dirt bikes with your dad. Your dad, you can be
Yeah.
65 and riding with your grandson and enjoy the same hobby well into your 80s. I mean, there's plenty of
Yeah.
dudes that race the local series that are 75 or whatever and
Mhm.
just still enjoying it. You can still do the same thing.
Exactly. I think it's so cool. I love seeing families out there, and that was kind of one of the biggest things that drew me to Hard Enduro was just seeing how family oriented it was.
Yeah,
I
for
had
sure.
spent some time around some other disciplines, and it was kind of a lot of what you said about motocross. It was a lot of like just very
Yeah,
cutthroat,
the
competitive, and
aggressive.
even
Yeah,
the
yeah,
families were like that. And it
yeah.
was just like, okay, dude, like calm down.
Chill out. You're at a local race somewhere in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. It's like, it's not that serious, I promise. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I
Yep.
was just trying to
Yep.
park my car and I was getting yelled at. And so,
Yeah. No, that's what's
um,
great about trail riding, though, is my dad would always
mhm,
lead and Keena would follow him, and then Tucker and I would be back behind him, just going all over across the trail, finding all the side hits. And so we were having fun on easy trails. Keena's having fun doing all the trails, and Dad's leading us all. So it's real good
That's
like that. It's
awesome.
fun for everyone.
That's really cool. I love that. Well, I think the only other thing that I had for you is really if you had advice to give to somebody who's new. So this is kind of a two-part again. Somebody who's new to dirt biking, what's your best advice for them in general? And then somebody who's looking to get into hard enduro, what's your best advice for them?
Um, I a lot of people ask me for advice about how to start riding a motorcycle, and I don't have very good answers for that because I don't even remember learning to ride a motorcycle. I
Yeah.
I barely remember learning to use the clutch, and I only remember that because Dad was like, "You got to learn this today, or I'm selling the bike." And I was like, "Okay, I'm learning it," and I learned it, and I was super stoked. But I don't really remember much about learning how to ride, so I can tell you what I find is useful, but it's probably not the greatest advice because I can't really relate to that.
Mhm.
But as far as riding, I think obviously balance is super important because you're on
Mhm.
two wheels and you're pretty tippy all the time. But I think even more important than that is momentum because if you have momentum, you're going to be much better balanced. Like it's so hard to stay on your bike at a standstill, but if you're cruising in
Mhm.
first gear, you know how to ride like that, obviously. So
Mhm.
it's so much easier if you've got momentum. Um, but then keeping your momentum is really difficult because we're going over logs and rocks and over weird side hills. So then how do you keep your momentum in a rock garden? So it's just
Mhm.
all these little things that add up to momentum. But overall, I think that's the most important thing is to learn how to ride smoothly and consistently stay at if you're staying at like a pretty steady pace in first gear everywhere on
Mhm.
gnarly stuff, you're doing really well. Like if you're not
Mhm.
start stop, that's doing really well. And so just to learn how to tie these different moves together and how to like wheelie over a little bit here and then drop your front tire and kind of grab your front brake a little bit and it'll dive it down and then use the rebound of your suspension to pop it up over the next one. But to do
Yeah.
all that, it's a lot of timing, and I think wheelies
Yeah.
are also very important too. Just to get
Mhm.
that front wheel up and off the ground seems to be hard for a lot of people, and it seems to be hard to do it consistently. And so I
Yeah.
think it's really important just to go out there and wheelie for like 4 hours. Just wheelie over and over and over again and just get the feeling of when you're up there, you find the balance point. And then when you're up there, you figure out, oh yeah. And I guess another thing that's super important is looking where you want to go. It's crazy. I don't know if you can. Yeah, looking where you want to go is super important. I find that so much in a hare scramble, especially. I'll come around a corner and there will be like
Mhm.
some nasty stick just poking straight at you and you fixate on it and you're like, oh, I don't want to go there, really don't want to go there, and you go right there because you're looking at it.
Yeah.
If
Yep.
you're riding, and I find this a lot with pivot turns as well, you get up there in your wheelie and if you look
Uh-huh.
directly at a rock on the ground exactly where you want your front tire to go, it's probably going to go
Uh-huh.
there because the rest of your body is moving that way. And this goes for
Okay.
so many things like snowboarding when you're doing backflips or 360s or bicycle riding or anything. It's like
Mhm.
target fixation. You look at what you want and you end up right there just because that's where all
Yeah.
your energy and your focus is on. Um,
Okay.
but that's like it's so hard to focus on that while you're riding. There's just so much going on. There's clutch, there's throttle, there's brakes, there's all this stuff. So it's really tricky to get into that and remember it every time. But I think I'd say looking where you want to go, like consciously
Mhm.
knowing I'm coming around this corner, that's exactly where I want to go and look at it. I think that helps quite a bit. And then
Okay.
wheelies and momentum. I'd say those are my top three things.
Okay.
The garage door went again, so I don't know if you could hear that or
Can
not.
you repeat your top three things?
Yeah, I'd say the top three most important things for learning to go faster are looking
Mhm.
exactly where you want to go and getting good
Mhm.
at wheelies and carrying your momentum, just linking together
Okay.
different moves and staying smooth the whole time.
Awesome.
I don't really
That's
remember the
great.
second part of the question.
It
But
was just kind of what would you have somebody like? What's the advice for hard enduro? Somebody who wants to get
oh
into
yeah,
hard enduro.
yeah. I I think it's really good to race a bunch of hare scrambles. Just you get that
Mhm.
intensity up and you're in the woods, so it's very similar. There's always logs at a hare scramble. There's always little hill climbs, and it's a good step to get up to hard enduros. And then
Mhm.
really the only difference is in hard enduros is everything's hard. So you got to obviously know how to go through some bigger rocks and some big logs. Um,
Mhm.
but I think the key thing in hard enduro is saving energy and knowing how to crash or knowing how to just like maneuver your bike while you're off of it. There's so many times that it's super helpful if you're in a weird spot on a side hill or something. It's really helpful to know the correct way to pick your bike up so it's not going to tumble downhill, or
Mhm.
the correct way to hop off your bike on a side hill so that your bike stays uphill instead of going downhill, or just
Yeah.
there's all these different ways that if you're in a rock garden and you're going to crash, or if you do crash in a rock garden, and then you go to pick your bike up, your rear tire, your front tire might fall in a hole. So you got to be aware of that before you even pick the bike up, and
Mhm.
you've got to move your tires around so that you know when you pick it up, you're going to be in a good spot then, because you don't want to just pick it up right away and get stuck right away. That always sucks. So
Yeah.
it's I've heard a lot of guys call it like bike yoga too. It can be important in hare scrambles too in some really tight trees, but mostly or definitely in hard enduro, there's so many times where you're like a lot of times too you'll have to pivot, turn, or get up on the rear wheel and hold your bike there and then like turn the bars and get through some real tight spot, or just
Mhm.
maneuvering the bike while you're off of it, I think is super important. And it's
Okay.
often overlooked too because that's not what you're trying to do. You don't want to be off the bike. You want to ride it through everything. But inevitably you're going to crash and you're going to get in all these weird tricky spots. So to know the best ways to pick it up and the best ways to pull yourself up a hill by yourself is really important.
Awesome. I love that. That's very different from what we usually get. So
Yeah,
I
well,
think
I
that's
probably crash a lot more than other people, so I've got a bit more experience just yanking it up by myself.
it's usually a lot more about like mindset and stuff like that.
Oh
So,
yeah, oh
but
that's
no, I
definitely
think that's
important. Yeah, but if you're gonna
it's
do hard
really
enduro,
really
you're already
important.
yeah, you're ready for the struggle, or at least you should know that you're gonna hate it at the midpoint, and you're gonna get into something that's really gnarly. And
Yeah.
if it's not for you, it's not for you. But if you get through at least one hard enduro race, you're probably gonna want to do more, just because that feeling of accomplishing something is so great and so fun. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, mindset's pretty important. But just don't give up, never quit, and you're gonna do a lot better than you think you will. So,
Yeah.
but
No, I think that's really awesome though. Like it's a very different look at things, and that's something I think that a lot of people overlook is the fact that you will spend time off your I spend a lot of time off of
so
my
much
bike.
time.
So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
totally
absolutely.
get that.
Yeah,
And
it's
I think a lot of times people at your level forget that, the rest of
yeah,
us
yeah.
have
I think there's
like we're
probably
all mortal.
yep, yeah. Well, and I go out and ride during the week, and I've got these hard enduro loops that I have set up. Not long at all, like
Mhm.
4 to 8 minutes tops, maybe. But every single different loop that I have is they all have sections where I'm not skilled enough to get up it, and I have to get off the bike and push a little bit. Or if it's muddy, I
Mhm.
definitely have to push. Or
Mhm.
just weird things like that. Like there's one hill in particular that I always seem to have to try 2 or 3 times at the beginning of the day before I get the timing down for it. And I'll get it the rest of the day. But it's just really good to figure out how to go back down the hill, or how to get yourself unstuck from all these nasty
Mhm.
spots that you're going to get in.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really important, especially in hard enduro and some of the stuff that I've seen you guys
Mhm.
have to go through. It's just like I don't know how you get through it, but you do, and
Yeah.
you make it look so easy. So
Yeah. Well, it's
I think
not, but yeah.
Well, I'm glad that you say that because you guys make it look so easy, and I'm just like, I would struggle so much in that section, like,
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
you guys like barely break a sweat. So
Hmm.
it's nice to know that you're human.
Yeah, yep, for sure.
Well, that's really awesome. I really appreciate your time. So in this last little bit, um, why don't you go ahead and give a shout out to anybody, or any thank yous, anything like that that you have?
Yeah, for sure. I've got to thank Matt Adams and Champion Brick. He's been amazing this whole year, and we've put together a pretty huge effort on his part and my part to get to all these races and do all this stuff. He's been dealing with a lot of medical issues this season, and
Mhm.
he's been able to fight through all of that, and that is really inspiring. Um,
Yeah.
but then Matt, and he's a pretty good salesman. He's sold me to a bunch of companies. So there's a bunch of companies that help us out. We've got Zavarati, Petro Zavaratiski with Zavarati Motorsports has been doing all the suspension, and that's been really, really good. We also have Climb, which is some of the best gear that I've worn. It's held up for me all season long, which is really rare. Previous seasons, I'll go through like 2 or 3 different pairs of gear in a season, and now I've got like the same 4 pairs of gear all season long, but I'll run them next year. They're perfectly fine. And even so, this yesterday, I like took this hotline in a hair scramble straight through a thorn patch, and I thought for sure my gear was going to be all ripped up. And I get back, and there's just thorns stuck all up my arm and in the gear, but no rips in the gear. It held up really, really great.
Wow.
So yeah, Climb stuff is awesome. And then XC Gear also helps us out a bunch. They've got the super good bar mounts, and we also put a bar pad on my bike from them, which is awesome. Just because I don't like taking a gut shot from that handlebar mount, it can be pretty abusive. And a lot of these
Yeah.
maneuvers, you got to get like way up there to get over something steep. So XC Gear's been awesome. Bike Graphics makes all of our bike graphics, and they help us out quite a bit. So they're super good. Rob's Performance is where we get the bikes from, and they've been
Mhm.
awesome this year too. They've hooked us up with like so many bikes for Matt and I, and such good deals on parts and everything. And their service is always really great. They rebuilt an engine for us in the 2020. They
Yeah.
had that done super fast and super well, which was really good. And yeah, and Matt just picked up a bike from them as well, so we got even more from them, which is super cool. And then Race Tech Titanium just started helping us out pretty recently. Devin
Mhm.
Milkovich is the guy there, and those guys have been awesome. There's been like we've been working with them for some different bolts. And just all these titanium parts on the bike are super trick and super cool. They hold up really well. They're not going to rust. They look super sharp. We've had issues earlier in the season, mostly my fault. I didn't wash the the bar mount good enough, and it was
Mhm.
like starting to rust with the stock bolts in there. And so, I mean, I
Uh,
got it all cleaned up, but now that we have titanium bolts, they're not going to rust at all, and they look super good. Um,
yeah.
And then so New Tech, the Nitro Moose setup or the
Mhm.
tubeless system has been helping us out as well, New Tech. And those are super great. So we use one of their mooses and we use one of their tubeless systems, and we cut the moose in half and wrap it around the tubeless system. And that keeps us from getting
Oh,
a flat while we still have a 360-degree rim lock that keeps the tire from moving. And so I run it at 0 psi for hard enduros, but it's still got that little bit of foam in there to cushion, and it protects your
mhm.
rim really good, so you're not gonna crunch that thing up. They've been awesome, and SX slide plate as well has helped us out a ton. They've sent us a bunch of skid plates because I just go through them so fast, especially on the 2020 with the linkage. There's a lot
Mhm.
of concrete where I ride normally, and so I'm always like scraping that bottom part of it. But those things hold up so long though, unless you just
Yeah.
run straight into concrete. So don't run straight into concrete. You're good to go. That's mostly use your air. I've been trying to work on some splats, and those have been kind of difficult to learn. Really
Yeah.
abusive bike to learn those. But and especially on the 24 SXS slide plate has this really great design where it just like fits over the stock one for us.
Oh,
I think you got to ask him specifically if you want to buy one of those, but I don't know the way to get it. But
yeah.
it's got this really nice mounting system, which is cool. And NSX Factor has helped us out a bunch too. They've got the front and rear grab straps, which is perfect for me because I'm always pulling my bike up everywhere. Those hold up super well, and the mounting system is really good. A lot of times you see guys with the front straps that get all like droopy and fall down the fork tubes and get all weird, but these
Mhm.
stick right where you want them and they hold up, especially when you're yanking them on them all the time. You'd think they would break, but no, they hold up good. um and then a guy named Dan Myers from Iowa, he actually puts on the Iowan Hard Enduro. He's been supporting me this year.
Oh, yeah.
He's got a company called 171 Racing that did a bunch of
Mhm.
t-shirts for us, which was so good because we sold a bunch of t-shirts at TKO and like local Iowa hair scrambles and stuff like that. And he's got a bunch of good designs. He actually does custom shirts too. He's got a press and everything. So if you hit
Okay,
up
cool.
171 Designs, you can get a race shirt made for whatever race you're promoting or anything like that. Um,
Nice.
and then EH Wolf and Sons is a local Wisconsin fuel company, and so we get
Mhm.
our race fuel from them. They're really helpful for that. Not far from us. Uh, and McGregor's Blink Bonnie is a supper club in northern Wisconsin, up by the
Mhm.
Twin Lakes area. I think it's called Three
Okay.
Lakes. And they helped us out a ton this year. They just been super helpful, just kind of getting me to races and getting parts on the bike, pretty much. But so we've got graphics of them all over the bike, which is cool. And then there's a
Nice.
bunch of individuals that have helped us out a whole bunch too. So there's kind of too many to
Yeah.
list. Like just everybody this year
Yeah.
has really stepped up, especially all the local people from Iowa. It's been really cool to see the support from that. They've all been very just super supportive of getting me to races and getting parts on the bike and all this stuff. It's been really cool to see that. But there's a lot. I had to look at the list because I can't remember everyone that helps us. There's too many that do it. Not too many, not at all. I appreciate it from everyone. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's been really cool to see the support this year as well because I thought like you just kind of think like who cares, right? I'm just out here riding my dirt bike, but a bunch of people are stoked to see you do well. So that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, even if people can't really give you money and like actually financially help you to get there,
Yeah,
I feel like
yeah.
having support is still huge.
Yeah,
You know,
even just
people
the
who
people
are
that
who
reach
are
out
out
and say
there.
like, "Hey, good luck this weekend." That always means so
Yeah.
much to me just to hear that.
Yeah. That's really awesome. Well, I
Hmm.
love that. Well, thank you again for taking this time. I really appreciate it. It's really cool to finally sit down and talk to you. I mean, you've just kind of been this bike that flies by at all these races. I'm like, I've never actually talked to you. So this is
Yeah,
really cool.
yeah, it was good. I enjoyed it.
Cool. Well, you survived your first podcast. You
I
did
did. I was
it.
nervous, but we got here to the end. All right. I
Yep.
don't think I
Yep.
stumbled too much.
Nope. Well, thank you again. And
Right.
hopefully we will talk to you soon.
Yeah, yeah. I'll see you later. Thank you.
All right. Bye.